Welcome to the Praxology podcast, where theology fuels the mission of the church. Last time we talked about a neglected subject that fits in from season 2 on spirituality and rest. In this episode, we walk across the bridge from leading self to leading others. So put on your walking or hiking shoes, depending on your standards here in Europe of what exactly that means, and let us keep in step with the Spirit. Oh yeah, Tyler's laughing for those of you watching. He's now laughing for those of you listening.
I love a good theology joke.
You like what I did there, yeah.
Good Bible joke.
Little pneumatology, little pneumonology. Pneumatology with an analogy. That's right.
Wow.
Anyway, we are your co-hosts, Tyler and Sean, and it's now time to get serious.
Oh.
Very serious.
Very serious. Serious shoes on.
Yeah. They're tied.
Yes.
And turn to the important task of leading others and how to disciple well. It's ultimately trajectory of this season, leading others, giving a toolkit for discipleship. So for this episode, we'll share historical and personal examples that are influential, I think, in how we think about leading others. And we'll also discuss how we lead others within our overall team by introducing something to you that we referenced in the previous what do you call it? Episode. I almost said season. In the previous episode called The 5 Challenges.
No. Leadership Challenge.
Leadership Challenge. But there, I confuse with just...
There are 5 of the leadership challenges.
There are 5 of those, and I also confused it with something from Josiah Venture.
Josiah Venture has 5 challenges, yes.
So Tyler, kick us off.
Okay. So we mentioned last episode, Leadership Challenge, coming out of the research of Kouzes and Posner, over a long period of collecting qualitative data from lots of different cultures on good leaders and then distilling them as those as challenges, not as innate abilities that, we hope you possess. And if you possess 3 out of the 5, then you're good. If you only possess 2 or 1, then you're out. No, these are all things that could be cultivated and developed. And
so their theory, anyone can be a leader.
Yes.
In fact, everyone is a leader. They just don't know it.
Yes. Everybody exerts some level of influence over people around them. And especially, well, maybe not especially, but probably especially as Christians who care about discipleship, we ought to be thinking about how to grow as leaders. And so we went through this training, and it was really, really helpful for identifying the areas that we're strong in our leadership and the areas that we need to work on, and not just to feel bad for ourselves, but actually to be given very practical tools for taking it further. And so, yeah. Anything else you want to say about that?
No, I think we're going to walk you into the 5 different challenges within the leadership challenge. And the first is, it's called Model the Way, and it gets at that idea of leading self to lead others. It's the first step of crossing the bridge. So yes. I think that's all I have to say. Yeah.
Absolutely. So the first practice of a good leader is that they model the way, that they practice what they preach, that they do what they said they would do, and that they live out of their values, and that those values are recognizable to those that are around them. So, for example, you might ask yourself, well, do I model the way? Am I a good role model?
This is the way.
This is the way. Thank you for that Star Wars quote. Wow, Sean.
Mandalorian.
Oh, my goodness.
Season 2 or 3, whichever. The newer one's coming out fairly quickly, I think.
Oh, if you want to go talk about Star Wars for the rest of this episode, we can totally do that. I'd be very happy.
Unless it bridges a theological theme, which I know you could do.
I could do it.
Let's model the other way.
Okay, let's model the other way.
Of Christ.
There we go.
The way of Mandalore.
Perfect. So, we could reflect and ask the question, do I set a personal example of what I expect of others? So, yeah, am I doing the things that I expect of other people? Do I model the way in that sense? Have we agreed on principles and values that we all adhere to together, or is it just that, I expect you to do something I expect you to agree with me on my values, or am I leading us in a discussion about how do we want to interact together? What values do we want to live out of? Another one, I won't go through all of them, but one that might be helpful for people to think about if you are already in a leadership position is, are you clear about your leadership philosophy? It doesn't mean that you have to have read 10 books, but to be able to define, this is how I naturally lead, and I'm self-aware enough to say that, and then also to recognize that that's not the only way to lead, and I might need to supplement it with some other things. And so, for example, if I could speak for myself, my philosophy of leadership, which when I took this, I identified that I'm not as vocal as I thought I was about it. But the things that I value as a leader, or things I try to do with my team, is I try to find the things that they're good at, or the things that they're passionate about, and then empower them to do those things. And so I want my team, I want you, Sean, I want you to thrive, man. I want you to be good at what you're doing. And that means, giving you space to dream and strategize and not have to just be bogged down with administrative details, which are really important for a college who needs to develop quality control mechanisms and things like that. But that shouldn't be the only thing that you do. You're also really good at walking with students step by step. And so that's why we gave you the role of formation tutor. And there are other teammates who are good at different things. Like another one of our teammates is really good at talking to people and making new connections. And so he's in charge of our internships, and he works with supervisors all over Europe and can just go and engage in different environments, which I am not that good at. But my philosophy of leadership is empowering my team to do what they're passionate about and what they're naturally gifted at or strong at. So I hope that gives you some questions to think about. Do I model the way? Do I lead myself well? Am I aware of the things that I'm good at, the things that I need to work on? Most importantly, do I practice what I preach?
Yeah, I think in terms of this one, my strategic mind is always moving forward to the future. And I realize, I tend to fall into the trap of just, I don't know how to speak, doing what I'm good at.
Yeah.
Type of thing. And this overall leadership challenge, it rounds it out 5 key things so that you don't do that, and so that you can strategically identify areas of weakness and grow those personally, which becomes part of modeling the way of doing what you want others to be doing. And so if I want others to be thinking into the forward, I have to remember that there's people on our team that really need context, and I tend to have context operating in the background, and therefore I don't use my words as much towards that, and so it seems like I'm assuming things, and that's just sometimes miscommunication, and sometimes I just am, because of pure forward focus from right now, and so integrating becomes really important. But now that I know that, I can help model the way, and sometimes remember that, as much as I talk about rest, to slow down. We all know of, I think we've actually referenced this study where they studied missionaries across the world and the effect that had on people who become Christians in relation to the society that they come from. And the answer is that they are far more busy than their national people. Mm-hmm. So Brazilian is way more busy than Brazilian non-Christian. They adapt the posture of missionaries who are just always on the go. And we've talked about why that's some of the case and all that kind of thing. But if we want to be careful of how we're modeling the way, so that we don't somehow unconsciously or subconsciously passively pass on this frenetic, fast-paced discipleship. It's just do, and if you're not doing stuff, then what are you doing? And so that's all caught up in this idea of modeling the way of Christ.
Yes. Well said.
Should we? Well, let's move into. Well, let me think. Maybe we won't.
I think we can come back to some of these.
We'll come back to some of the other 4. We're not intending to talk about all 5. We really want to highlight one more because of again the Central Eastern European context. And so I think let's pause there in terms of modeling the way. Again, one of the things that we reference is wanting to give some good biblical tools and also some books. So we're going to do our lightning round a little earlier, a little bit out of order for the day. Again, praxology@formation.org.uk.
Give us a good name.
We don't like lightning round. Somebody help. Tyler, you haven't looked at this question previously, I don't think.
Oh, no.
Best leadership book.
Oh.
Off the top of your head.
Oh, okay. My favorite leadership book, just because I haven't read a whole ton of them, but this one is really, really good and fun. Raise your hand even if you're in the car and you're supposed to have your hands on the wheel. Raise your hand if you like Pixar movies.
Just one hand if you're driving.
Just one hand. Don't raise both hands. No. Pixar. There's a book called Creativity, Inc. That talks about how to lead people into basically new territory, into creative territory, and how to basically create an environment where it's everybody can bring their ideas to the table, and also every idea is worth critiquing. But out of that, there comes some amazing stuff. We all know movies like The Incredibles and Toy Story, and especially those early 10, 15 years, they really led in a very countercultural way, where it was not top down. It was very empowering of other people around. So, which fits with kind of the philosophy that I shared of wanting, to get the best out of my team, and also recognizing my own limitations. So that's a very fun, inspiring, and very interesting book if you like Pixar and history of cinema.
I never knew this book before right now.
Yeah.
So I'll
leave it on your desk.
Amazing. I'll read it when I have time for reading books that are not for research purposes. That doesn't happen very often, as much as it should probably. Worst leadership book.
Well, I probably didn't get far enough. That's my problem. Is if something's not useful, I clear the space in my head for things that are useful. So, there's probably a book that I read in my undergrad that I just have blocked out of my memory. Oh, what was it? We all had to read a book. It was kind of leadership, but kind of like ministry.
Best question ever from Andy Stanley.
No,
I think it was Andy Stanley.
It was. Oh, everybody made fun of it. Oh, I'm not going to be able to remember it. It was something about effectiveness. How to be effective. But it's a much better title than that.
7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
No. Oh, I know it's going to bug me. You should have prepared me for this question, John. Okay, turn it back to you.
The point is to not prepare you so that it's a hot take. It's just on the spot. And I don't have to answer my own question.
That's not fair. What's your middle favorite book on leadership you've ever read? What's the most neutral book on leadership you've ever read?
Most neutral? What does that even mean?
That it was like, meh.
There's this one's not meh. It's more.
I remember. Sorry, I remember the name of the book. Maximizing Your Effectiveness. Isn't that such an American title?
Yeah.
So continue.
Very, very well. There's a book that I think is useful for discipleship and leadership, but it's probably not thought of that way ever. It's from Brian Hedges. It's called Christ Formed in You. It's a book on discipleship and like piety kind of a thing. Written, I think, from more in the Reformed stream. For those of you who care, for those of you who don't, it's still a wonderful text. And it's not a it's a book in theology, not a traditional leadership book. So it fits in there of like best, worst. Well, this is maybe one that would not be considered, that I might consider people to read for the idea of leadership. To read it with that lens in mind could be helpful.
Okay.
Worst, I already said the worst.
Oh, yeah, you did. Last episode.
Being Leaders from Albie Malfers. I read that in undergrad.
Oh, yeah?
I just... the wisdom in the book was lost on me. And maybe I should go back and give it a try.
Maybe.
I do think one of the best, though, is Leadership Challenge.
Yeah, for sure. I like that it's evidence-based, research-based. That's always good, because often leadership books are like, hey, I'm a guru, and I figured it out. And if you just do what I did, then everything's going to work out.
I also did just think of, I haven't read this book, but Canoeing the Mountains from, was it Todd Bolsinger? I think. Again, it's from Lewis and Clark, the people who did expeditions on a boat, whatever. I don't know which preposition to use.
From a boat, under a boat. At times they did. They had to carry their. That's what the point is. Canoeing the mountains. They had to take their boat
and get
up into the mountains. No, what happened was that they were trying to find the source of some river, was the Mississippi or something like that.
Remember.
In North America, and then they thought that it was just going to be flat because most of like the eastern part of America is fairly flat, and then they hit the Rocky Mountains and they had to change the plan. So
yeah, and again, that's not one I've read, but people have recommended it to me. Like,
so it's about
crazy.
leading ministry, ministry change, essentially, leading in the midst of instability and needing to adjust course in the context of ministry.
Yeah, there's another one I'm trying to think of too. I've officially answered my question, more than answered my question. So
good job.
I want to move us forward now, and the logic and reasoning is this. Because I said we were going to give some personal examples, but I want to start in a way that kind of teases out where we're going with one of the 5 challenges from Leadership Challenge, and that is called Encourage the Heart. And so I think a brilliant way of doing the exact opposite of that is from a guy who used to live in South Bend, Indiana. He was the coach of Notre Dame football. Yes, American.
Spoiler alert.
American football.
If this was any other day than a podcast recording day, Sean would and if it wasn't like 32 degrees outside Celsius, Sean would probably be wearing his Notre Dame sweatshirt.
It's true. It's true. If you would have seen me yesterday, it was a blue jersey with Colts logo on it for the NFL.
There you go.
And Saturday I was wearing a Notre Dame jersey because that's what you got to do. And I don't know why I do that. I just do. But there's a guy named Brian Kelly who used to coach there, and now he coaches way in the South, like in the swamp, literally in Louisiana. And they had a big game the first week of the season, like 2 weeks ago. And he went on a record, which you should never do. It's terrible leadership. And basically said, like, I guarantee we're going to win this game.
Oh.
He said, we're going to go out there and we're going to really beat Florida State. He coaches at LSU for anybody who tracks with college football, but I doubt it. This is just illustration. And so, actually, by the way, this is a good time for me to pause and introduce the newest member of our staff, and also the newest member that will be mostly behind the scenes for those of you watching, for those of you listening. His name is Killian Spies.
Other way around. Spies.
I can't ever get it right. It's the Czech in my head, and it's, whatever. He happens to love American football because he is from a wonderful country known as Germany, and Germans love American football.
Wow.
Fun fact. Nobody else cares. Germans, we like each other. And he's going to be doing some behind-the-scenes stuff, wrapping up, editing, all of the really, really important stuff that I have no idea what's going on.
Yep.
But it makes your life wonderful because it
Yes.
allows you to hear us more clearly, better, and so on. And we'll probably bring him on at some point so you can see his face. Maybe we'll talk some football. It's probably in my head also because today is Monday, and I always give Tyler an update on Mondays of scores that he never cared about. Back to Brian Kelly. He said after they lost by like forever, they lost, they just got destroyed. Lost by like 30 or something to a team that they were supposed to win against. And he basically called the football program, of which he's the first-year coach of. Thankfully, he's not at Notre Dame anymore, where I like. But he called his program a total failure.
After one game.
Yeah. Maybe this was taken slightly out of context, but that's just not a way to encourage and not a way to lead. I think Brian Kelly's an example here of how not to lead others. We want to lead others by motivating them positively and for them to walk in freedom instead of fear or like constant restrictions in that fear of failure. Sports psychology thing operating in the background. If you don't want it to happen, it's going to happen. And it's the idea of self-fulfilling prophecy. And it's one of the biggest things I think that I can do in a weekly discipleship meeting that I have with a leader here in the Czech Republic. And I'll borrow from some systematic theologians who say that to lead well, my leadership wording on purpose, requires strong shared attention. That comes from Eleonore Stump. Wandering in Darkness, anything else she's ever written, this is like her idea. And other theologians say the same thing. Thomas McCall, he uses the phrase joint attention. Stump is focused more in pneumatology, so the spirit, and joint attention from McCall is more focused in Christology. But the point is basically the same. It involves listening to the point of empathy, feeling what others are feeling, and responding to what the heart of people are really trying to say, because words are just a tip of the iceberg. There's a huge thing below the surface known as the rest of the human body that can be confusing. And sometimes when people are talking, they're trying to figure out actively what's going on with their words. And so if you're listening closely, it allows you to, you feel something and you say something in an empathy statement, and you're truly sharing attention, like what the Spirit does with us, like what Jesus does with us. And people just come stop in their tracks and be like, wow, you understand me. That's the idea of shared attention that I don't know that Brian Kelly did. maybe he's doing better now. But I think one of the best things in reflection for me, I'll put the question on you of however you want to share in terms of leading others well, what you do that has been the most impactful, like here in Europe.
Yeah.
And so I'll finish mine while you're thinking. And it's just a weekly walk that I take, and we're just walking, talking, whatever comes up, comes up. Sometimes it's in Czech, sometimes it's in English. And I think the best thing that I do is just listen, because most of the time I'm just trying to actively figure out and kind of not diagnose the situation so I can give the medicine, but just asking questions so that I can figure out what's going on from his perspective. And then maybe I could have a suggestion at some point. But I never come at it from like, okay, let's diagnose and solve. It's more just conversation-based, and I'm just really, really trying to listen well. And that seems to just go a really, really long way. So I think that's the biggest thing in terms of like leading others for me here in Europe is just listen well to the point of sharing attention, having empathy. What's it for you?
Absolutely. I think the ministry of encouragement goes a long way here. And so I agree that just the practice of listening is crucial. For me, the way that I try to do that is kind of holding up a positive mirror for people, and like because you know
the Anabaptist martyrs mirror. No, you don't know. Okay,
I don't know what that is.
It doesn't relate. It's just they would put a mirror up in their home known as the martyr's mirror as a reminder that they were following Christ and it was going to probably cost them their life. Oftentimes it did. So that's what it came to be known as.
Wow. Okay.
Reflect on that aspect of Christianity.
Yeah. Yeah. That puts things into perspective.
Yeah.
So not necessarily martyr mirror, but that is cool. More just because okay, very practically. A lot of times, or a lot of young people, and could happen to any of us. We look into a mirror of ourselves, and we see the things that are bad, that could be better. Like, I don't like this feature about myself, or this my nose is too big, or I have this pimple, or whatever. It's easy to, when you look at yourself and who you are and what you're doing, it's easy to point out the flaws. I know that's true for myself too. When I think about my ministry and my leadership, it's easy for me to say, well, okay, fine, there's this fruit, and yeah, people are growing, but this, like, these things are lacking, and that therefore makes everything a failure. It can go that dark. And that certainly is the case for a lot of leaders here who are thrust into positions of influence and positions of responsibility, sometimes because there's no one else, and it's easy for them to think, well, yeah, okay, I'm doing something, but the negative outweighs the positive. And so what I try to do, if I have the opportunity to speak into someone's life, is just hold up the positive mirror and say, you know what? That might be true. That might be true that these things are lacking, and you can work on these, but here's how I see God using you, and here's the good that I see in your attitude or your approach or your heart, and here's how I see you making a difference. And that doesn't mean that I neglect or ignore the things that are lacking, but often that positive mirror can then open the door to actually have a constructive conversation about the things that do need to be worked on.
Yeah, I think as I'm reflecting on what you're saying, I do this with students oftentimes, because there's two modes of thinking, and our brains kind of get in ruts of thinking in one or the other. It's either positive or negative. And one of the best questions, I suppose, listening well does require asking questions. Yeah, is just maybe it's not even a question, it's just a statement. Well, in everything you've just told me, you focused only from this perspective. Many people might classify this perspective as negative. So what's positive? Think about the same thing, but from positive perspective. Yeah. And oftentimes it literally changes the conversation, because it goes from not just focusing on the flaws, or like I've got I don't know, my hair's sticking up here and it's longer and needs to be cut or something. I don't know. And focusing more on the positives, which, I don't know, it's like my daughter, I suppose, when she puts on an Elsa dress from Frozen, she just go, "I princess." Okay, she looked in the mirror and she wasn't focusing on the negative. She only was focusing on the positive. Yes. But again, that's the example of the extremes that we can fall into, and reminding people of the other can be really, really helpful. Mm-hmm. And so it's actually can be constructive to say, well, you've just spoken about everything very positively. What about this, or this? Mm-hmm. Yes. From the negative side, and basically bringing in a balance, because we don't live in an idealistic vacuum. We live in real life where it's positive and negative goes together, like always. So I think that's a great one. Yeah.
Yeah. I was trying to think if I could have an example from Jesus and his ministry. And there were for sure times where he was pretty brutally honest and called people out. But that was usually if they were being hard-hearted and hypocritical. But generally, when he was working with people over a longer period of time, I think he would often highlight the positive first in order to bridge into, okay, and here's what we need to work on. So a couple things that come to mind is like the rich young ruler, where he says, okay, yeah, you have done all those things. Good job. You have, you followed the law, but what about this one? And so affirming what was good to be affirmed, but then also showing, like you said, okay, but there is something lacking here. Another one that came to mind was when Peter, confesses that Jesus is the Messiah. Peter was pretty pumped about that, even though his picture of the Messiah was very different than what Jesus was actually trying to communicate. But he also was like, no, you're right. But don't tell anyone. And because the Son of Man must suffer and die and so on and so forth. So he fills it back in, but he does affirm what was, praiseworthy before then moving on. So I think we can do that as well in our leadership. Like, actually speaking positively first creates a lot of common ground that then allows a constructive conversation to happen moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe also, I don't know the reference chapter and reference where it's found, but the feeding of the 5,000, where the disciples are only focused on the problem.
Yeah.
And Jesus, read through that text wherever it's found, and look at how Jesus responds to the disciples. Forget about the rest of the story because there's a lot going on. But if you simply look at when Jesus responds to them, like, hey, Jesus is late. We're quite a ways away from like where people live. They need to go get some food. They're probably thinking I'm hungry too.
Yeah.
And Jesus is like, I forget his exact wording, but he basically says, so give them something to eat. And they're only focused on the negative, on the problem, and he's focused on helping them grow.
Yep.
And then using them for a miracle. And basically the point is that they missed what's right in front of them. They missed the power literally in front of them that was working through, that could work through them. And Jesus helped them through his questioning to get to the point where they could go, oh, like, why didn't we think of that? And did the disciples ultimately think that as they were passing out all of this food and having leftovers? Were they actively thinking, wow, I can't believe I missed that? Like, we just don't know. And maybe that's more of an abstract example. But
I think it's
all
a great
the same,
example.
It's Jesus helping them to focus on a positive within a negative.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Help them see the things that they do have right in front of them, that there are some other options and possibilities, and that God might be doing something. So in Mark chapter 6.
Yeah. And I mean, there's another point there on like leading others. We oftentimes miss what's right in front of us because we're so in the zone. Like, I think sometimes you'll bring me a thing of research that you're writing for a class or something, and I'll do the same thing, and you'll say this, and I'll go, oh, I hadn't thought about it. Part of it's your discipline's different than mine. Part of it's you haven't been looking at it for as many hours as I have, and so you bring that perspective that can be really helpful, and hopefully sometimes I can bring the same perspective that's somewhat helpful. But helping people to see what's right under their nose oftentimes it's like when people go, oh, and they have those light bulb moments. It's like, oh, it was right here the whole time. How did I not know that?
Yeah.
It's like, well, the Spirit used me to ask this question, and I'm happy that it helped. But that is, I think, something along the way that we've stumbled across in terms of leading others well.
Yeah.
Let's go into the final segment here of the leadership challenge then and discuss encourage the heart. We'll skip over the other leadership challenge aspects. You can find those online. They have a website we can link to. But we'll go into encourage the heart and what they mean by that.
Yeah. So again, I'll give some just examples. The idea behind encourage the heart is really to create community, create a community of trust and appreciation. But it happens by recognizing individuals contributions and individual excellence as well. And so if someone has done something praiseworthy, then recognizing it, calling it out. In public. Yeah, that's right. In public. And so again, some kind of diagnostic questions you could ask yourself are, do you praise someone when they do a good job? Do you praise someone when they do a good job? Or is it just like, oh, well, it was their job. That was, their responsibility. And so they were supposed to do it. And so they should just have an internal sense of fulfillment. They don't need to hear it from me. Maybe it is their job, but it goes a long way if you recognize that and say, good job. I know I need to remind myself of this one often. What's another one? this is kind of a big one, I think, in Europe. Do you make it a point to express your confidence in someone else's abilities? Like, I think you can do this. I see God's hand on you. He's been preparing you for this. Yeah, of course this is hard and it's not going to be easy, but I believe you're up for it, that you can do it. Again, often people stumble into leadership positions here in Central and Eastern Europe. And so sometimes you skip that step, or it just kind of gets totally lost, where someone more seasoned than you can tell you've got this, even if you don't completely. But can you do that for others? And a final one is, do you celebrate accomplishments? It's a little different than just recognizing, that people did a good job. But if your team has been working hard on, getting this milestone, doing the camp, having the event, or trying to grow your ministry, once that's achieved, do you just keep going, or do you stop and celebrate and recognize, everybody that we've done this? Buy them a gift. That's what my wife is going to be so proud of me for saying that. Thanking someone with a gift, even if it's small, and recognizing, celebrating what God has done through your teammates. Those are some ideas.
Yeah, I think so. It just, we see it in our students. They're so focused in the weeds of their ministry. They just think nothing good is happening because they're seeing all the problems. Like, I don't have this person, and I'm doing too much, and I don't want to be, and I wanted to empower others, but it's not working like I thought it was, because there's so many other things to do, plus the administrative stuff, plus school.
Yeah.
They just get kind of lost and disoriented. And to say, what pause, my perspective, if I take a big step back, I recognize I'm not in your situation, but it seems to me that you just said that you have been leading this particular group, and it's shown a lot of fruit in this very specific way.
Yeah.
Oftentimes they go, like they were overlooking the individual fruit for the forest of things to do. And so listening to be able to encourage the heart, that does require words, but it also requires listening very well in order to really see give thought to, they're discouraged. I could give any kind of random encouragement, but what is it that they need to hear? Like, where are they the most, where do I perceive they might be the most insecure? And I kind of guess, and I give an encouragement directly into that, because that is what Spirit-empowered leaders do.
Yeah, it's not just a generic pat on the back, good job, dude, and then move on. I like the posture of, listening for where are they at and what do they need to hear in dialogue with the Spirit as well, and then being a vessel, a vehicle for really the encouragement of God to them.
Yeah, I take that idea, I didn't realize till you were talking, from pneumatology. Shocker, that's the discipline I'm within. But the Spirit is counselor. And so what is the Spirit speaking into for us? That's the most impactful. It's those areas of insecurity and saying, actually, here's what's true. That's so empowering. Well, I think because the Spirit is living inside of us, we can do that same thing for other people by extension.
Absolutely.
And speak into those insecurities with confidence, not knowing and being happy about the fact that they have that insecurity, or not speaking in confidence of degree of positivity that you're actually right, but speaking closely enough to what their real need is, that it's going to somehow connect, and you encourage that way. I think it's really, really a powerful tool to have.
Hmm.
As I mean, that's what we're trying to uncover in this particular season. That encouraging the heart piece there is a really powerful tool to have when it comes to serving others.
Yeah.
And it actually helps you serve yourself, because when you do that, you get a sense of joy that you kind of can't help. It just kind of it's part of the whole package. And so it does. Again, it goes both ways.
Absolutely.
You have your
It's
Bible
great.
open. You gonna close us here with something?
Oh, yes. So I was just thinking, like, if in terms of being, vehicles of the Spirit's comfort, what sort of comfort does the Spirit offer us? And so that could help us think, like, what can we be channels for? Well, Romans 8 came to mind for me.
Mm-hmm. Life in the Spirit.
Yeah, for all those led by God's Spirit are God's children. You didn't receive the spirit of slavery to fall back into fear. Instead, you received the spirit of adoption, by whom we cry out, Abba, Father. The Spirit himself testifies together with our spirit that we are God's children. And so that could be one avenue. How can I encourage this person to help them receive that encouragement from the Spirit that they belong to God, that they are safe in his hands, they don't need to live out of fear or anxiety, but they can live in the confidence knowing who they belong to. And I remember in the exercise, when we were doing the training for the Leadership Challenge, we were asked to write down specific names of people in our lives that need encouragement. So if you're driving right now, don't take your hands off the wheel. But if you're not, take a moment and pull up your notes function on your phone. Who's someone that God's laid on your heart that needs encouragement? I have my list in front of me, and I'm seeing that I've got 3 out of the 5, but there are 2 more that still need some encouragement from me that God has laid on my heart, and so I need to go make sure I'm obedient to that prompting. So it helps to have specific people in mind.
Yeah. So we'll close it there. Go in the power of the Spirit and look for ways to be a comforting presence to others. Again, that's what the Spirit does for us. We can pass that along in his power. And do think of a few people that you can say, wow, they've been doing a lot, and maybe they've been a little discouraged. What exactly have they been discouraged about? Okay, I have it. And then go speak into that with kindness.
Yeah.
With encouraging words. And so we'll end it there. We've focused so far on leading ourselves. We focused on leading others. We've kind of built a construct of a bridge that goes between the two. And a third, it's not really going to fit with this bridge analogy like super well, but leading teams. So self, others, teams. It's kind of a logical progression. We hinted at it here with what Leadership Challenge has done within our higher education for mission team. And we'll use that as a jumping off point for next time to go into what leadership tools do we need. Again, it could be topics, ideas, authors, and we'll try to maintain ourselves to be as practical as possible. What kind of leadership tools do I need to serve well within my team? Like to my team as well as my team leading outward to others. So we'll use that as a teaser for next episode. And with that, we say, go in the power of the Holy Spirit and in the spirit of Galatians, bear one another's burdens, and in so doing, fulfill the law of Christ. And in bearing those burdens, speak into them with encouragement. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.